My name is Noah Carter, and I have spent the last decade building something indestructible. At 35, I am the owner and CEO of Carter Holdings, a multinational investment firm that has its hands in everything from real estate to private equity. But power and wealth were not handed to me. I had to fight for every inch, every deal, every opportunity. 3 years ago, I was not the man I am today. I was just another ambitious entrepreneur, grinding away, trying to make something of myself. I was married then, to a woman who I thought would stand beside me through thick and thin. Isabella Moore. She was beautiful, intelligent, and driven, but she had one fatal flaw. She craved success more than she craved loyalty. At the time, Carter Holdings was still in its infancy, and though I had vision and potential, I was not the man at the top. Not yet. Isabella, however, had no patience for a man in the process of building an empire. She wanted a man who already had one. That's when Liam Preston entered the picture. A hedge fund manager with a slick tongue and an obscene amount of money, he represented everything Isabella wanted: fast wealth, flashy luxury, and immediate power. And just like that, she walked away. I can still remember the night she left. She sat across from me at our dining table, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass as she carefully chose her words. "Noah, I don't think this is working anymore." Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. I looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw it in her eyes. She had already made up her mind. She had already moved on. I asked her the question that had been gnawing at me for weeks. "Is there someone else?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second. That was all the answer I needed. "I just want a different life," she said instead, evading the question. "I want stability. I want to be with someone who can give me the life I deserve." The life she deserved. At that moment, I realized I had been nothing more than a stepping stone to her. She saw my ambition, my drive. But she wasn't willing to wait for the moment when it all paid off. She wanted a shortcut, and she found it in Liam Preston. She left me that night, packed her bags, and disappeared into a world of private jets, luxury vacations, and the kind of superficial glamour she had always craved. For 3 years, I let her go. I focused on my work, channeled every ounce of my energy into Carter Holdings. While she was attending exclusive galas and posting about her extravagant life, I was working, planning, building. And now, 3 years later, the tables have turned in a way she never could have predicted. I sit in a sleek, glass-walled conference room, surrounded by top executives and legal teams, staring at the names printed on the contract before me. Preston Holdings. A $20 billion investment deal, one of the biggest of the decade. A deal that will determine the future of their company. And they have no idea that I am the one holding the final decision. Liam and Isabella are on the other side of this deal, convinced they are about to secure an investment that will elevate their company to new heights. I can already imagine the arrogance in Liam's tone, the confidence in Isabella's stride. They think they are untouchable. They don't know that Carter Holdings isn't just another investor at the table. It's my company. And I have been waiting for this moment for a very, very long time. I sat in the shadows of the lavish bar inside the high-rise hotel, watching as Liam Preston and Isabella Moore reveled in their own arrogance. They had no idea I was there, no idea I was even in the same city, let alone at the same table of negotiations they thought they had in the bag. Liam had always been the type to flaunt wealth he hadn't actually earned. Unlike me, who built my company from nothing but hard work and calculated risk, he had inherited his initial capital through family connections, leveraged it recklessly, and rode the market like a spoiled gambler who never imagined he could lose. His kind always believed they were untouchable, until they weren't. I watched as he swirled his whiskey, leaning back in his chair, speaking just loud enough for everyone around to hear. It was always a performance with him. "This deal is going to define the next decade," Liam said, his voice dripping with self-importance. "If Carter Holdings wants in, they better be ready to prove they deserve a seat at the table." I nearly laughed at that. The audacity. If only he knew. Isabella was next to him, dressed in a sleek designer dress, looking every bit the polished, high-society woman she had always dreamed of becoming. But I could see it, even from my seat in the distance. The slight tightness around her eyes, the way she leaned in just a little too much when Liam spoke, as if she needed reassurance that she was still on the winning side. 3 years ago, she had walked away from me without hesitation. No doubt, she had expected never to look back, certain that I would fade into obscurity while she ascended to the world she believed she belonged in. And yet, here we were. What neither of them knew was that I owned the very company they were seeking investment from, that every executive they had met so far worked for me, that the people they had spoken down to, dismissed as small players in this negotiation, were taking their cues from me. I had deliberately stayed in the background, watching them operate, letting them show me exactly who they were. And they had not disappointed. Carter Holdings isn't as powerful as people say, Liam continued, chuckling as he took another sip of his drink. They've been expanding, sure, but this deal is their golden ticket. Without us, they won't get a foot into this industry. I exchanged a glance with my CFO, Lucas, who sat at the bar beside me, nursing a glass of bourbon. He smirked. These guys really have no clue, he muttered under his breath. No, they don't, I said, tapping my fingers against the glass in front of me. Liam and Isabella continued talking, oblivious to the truth. They saw Carter Holdings as just another investment firm eager for a piece of their empire. They thought they were in control. Isabella's voice was smooth, confident. This deal will solidify everything we've worked for, she said. Once we get Carter Holdings to sign, we'll be unstoppable. She had always been like this, aligning herself with whoever she believed was winning, attaching herself to power like a vine seeking the strongest tree. Once, she had looked at me the way she now looked at Liam. Once, she had believed in my potential, until she decided potential wasn't enough. It would be almost tragic if it weren't so satisfying. Lucas leaned in. Should we give them a preview of what's coming? Not yet. I took a sip of my drink, savoring the moment. Let them keep believing they're in control. The longer they think they have the upper hand, the harder they'll fall. Liam laughed again, shaking his head. It's actually kind of funny. Carter Holdings probably thinks they have leverage. I guarantee you, they'll take whatever scraps we offer them. I raised an eyebrow. Scraps. Lucas let out a low whistle. This is going to be brutal. Oh, it was. But not in the way Liam thought. I watched as he waved over the bartender, ordering another round of drinks. He was celebrating already, convinced of his own invincibility. And Isabella? She was glowing, her gaze filled with admiration as she clung to the man she had chosen over me. I wonder how she will look when she realizes the truth, when she finds out that the man she left in the dust now held the fate of her entire world in his hands. They thought this deal would make or break Carter Holdings. What they didn't realize was that it would actually break them. Liam leaned back, lifting his glass in a mock toast. To the future, he said, smirking. I smiled to myself, lifting my own glass from my spot at the bar. To the future, I murmured, because in less than 24 hours, their future would belong to me. The boardroom was a glass-walled masterpiece, towering above the city skyline. The conference table stretched long, polished to perfection, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs that screamed power and wealth. Everything about this room was designed to impress, to intimidate, to set the stage for the kind of high-stakes decisions that shaped entire industries. Today, it would be the backdrop for something far more entertaining. I walked in without fanfare, dressed in a crisp, dark suit. My tie knotted with precision. My presence was unassuming, just another executive taking a seat at the far end of the table, away from the immediate conversation. I wasn't here to be the center of attention. Not yet. My senior executives were already seated, reviewing documents and preparing for the investment proposal. I had deliberately instructed them not to reveal my identity just yet. I wanted to watch. I wanted to see how they carried themselves when they thought they were in control. And just as expected, Liam and Isabella entered like they owned the place. Isabella stepped in first, her heels clicking against the marble floor with practiced confidence. She wore an ivory-colored business suit, her hair in loose waves, and her expression radiated power, or at least the illusion of it. She had always been good at appearances. She carried herself like a woman who had it all, but I knew better. That confidence would crack soon enough. Liam followed, his usual smirk in place. wearing an expensive charcoal suit with cufflinks that probably cost more than most people's rent. He carried himself like a man who had already won, like a king stepping into his own castle. I sat motionless, my hands folded in front of me, watching. They didn't even glance in my direction. They didn't recognize me. I had expected as much. It had been 3 years, and I had changed. I had refined everything about myself. My presence, my demeanor, my entire approach to power. I wasn't the struggling entrepreneur Isabella had walked away from. I wasn't the man trying to prove his worth. I was the worth. "Let's get started, gentlemen," Liam said smoothly as he took his seat, exuding confidence. He leaned back, adjusting his watch, another expensive accessory that symbolized his wealth. "I assume Carter Holdings has already reviewed the investment proposal. We're here to finalize the terms." I remained silent, letting my CFO, Lucas, lead the conversation. Lucas nodded, flipping through the thick packet of documents in front of him. "We have reviewed everything, yes? But before we move forward, we need to clarify a few things." Liam barely concealed his irritation. He didn't like to be questioned. "There's not much to clarify," he said. "The terms are all outlined. Carter Holdings wants in. We welcome the investment. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, gentlemen. Preston Holdings is set to dominate the next decade." Lucas smirked slightly, casting a glance in my direction before looking back at Liam. "We appreciate the enthusiasm," Lucas said coolly. "But Carter Holdings doesn't rush into deals based on excitement alone." Liam's smirk tightened. "Excitement?" He let out a short laugh. "This isn't about excitement. It's about numbers. The projections speak for themselves. If you're hesitating, maybe Carter Holdings isn't as bold as we thought." I saw it then, the subtle flicker in Isabella's expression, the way her eyes darted toward Lucas, calculating. She had always been smart. She knew something was off. "We were under the impression that Carter Holdings was eager to expand into this sector," Isabella said, her voice smooth. "Our investors were told this was a priority acquisition. Are you suggesting otherwise?" Lucas chuckled under his breath. "Oh, it's a priority, all right." Liam frowned. "Then what's the holdup?" I let the silence stretch for a few seconds before I finally spoke. "The holdup is that we're still deciding if it's worth our time." The shift in energy was instant. Isabella's head snapped in my direction. Liam furrowed his brows, finally registering that someone else had spoken. I leaned forward, my hands resting on the table, and met their stares head-on. Recognition dawned in Isabella's eyes first. Her lips parted slightly, confusion flickering across her expression. She knew. She knew my voice. And then, realization crashed into her like a tidal wave. Her breath hitched. "Noah," she whispered, disbelief coating her voice. Liam blinked, his confidence wavering for the first time. "Wait," his eyes scanned my face, as if trying to reconcile the memory of the man he had once dismissed with the one sitting before him now. I smiled, slow and deliberate. "It's been a while." Isabella looked as if she had seen a ghost. Liam, however, recovered quickly, forcing out a chuckle. "Well, this is unexpected." He tried to mask his unease with casual arrogance, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "I had no idea you were involved with Carter Holdings." "You wouldn't," I said simply. He let out another forced laugh, leaning back in his chair. "So, what are you, a junior partner here? A consultant?" I tilted my head slightly. "Something like that." His confidence returned. He thought he had figured me out. "That's great," he said, his smirk resurfacing. A familiar face. "That should make this deal easier." I chuckled. "Should it?" Isabella was still staring at me, her face pale. You're with Carter Holdings?" I met her gaze, holding it steady. "Not quite." Liam scoffed, waving a hand. "Look, I don't care what role you have here, Noah. This deal is a golden opportunity, and I assume your bosses will want to hear what we have to offer." Lucas coughed into his fist, barely suppressing his amusement. I exhaled slowly, then leaned back in my chair. "I am the boss." Silence. A thick, suffocating silence filled the room, pressing down on them like an unbearable weight. Isabella's face drained of all color. Liam's smirk vanished. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. I watched the realization settle over them, the moment when the truth hit like a wrecking ball. I wasn't a junior partner. I wasn't a consultant. I wasn't an executive taking notes for someone else. I was the owner, the CEO, the man who held their entire future in his hands. Liam swallowed hard, his bravado crumbling at the edges. You! His voice cracked slightly before he forced himself to straighten. You run Carter Holdings? I smiled, unbothered. Surprised? Isabella inhaled sharply, still struggling to process. Her hands clenched slightly on the table. How? How is that possible? I shrugged. 3 years is a long time. Liam opened his mouth, then closed it. His mind was scrambling for something, anything, to regain control of the conversation. But there was nothing, because the power he thought he had, the deal he thought he controlled, it all belonged to me now. The gala was held at one of the most exclusive 5-star hotels in the city. A sprawling venue adorned with crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and a breathtaking view of the skyline from its open-air terrace. It was the kind of event designed to exude power and exclusivity, a gathering of business moguls, investors, and industry leaders. And tonight, it was the stage for something far more entertaining. I arrived fashionably late, stepping into the grand ballroom with quiet confidence. The crowd was already thick with the elite, sipping expensive champagne, exchanging fake pleasantries, and basking in their own wealth. The atmosphere buzzed with the sound of clinking glasses, light laughter, and the murmurs of deals being brokered in hushed voices. I spotted Liam Preston immediately. He stood near the center of the room, his presence commanding attention. Dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, he had a whiskey glass in hand and was deep in conversation with a group of executives, no doubt trying to impress them with exaggerated tales of his own success. And beside him, Isabella. She wore a deep emerald gown that hugged her figure, her hair styled in elegant waves, her jewelry expensive but tasteful. From the outside, she still carried the aura of a woman who had it all. But I knew better now. As I made my way through the crowd, I overheard snippets of conversation. People were buzzing about the Preston Holdings investment deal, some excited, others skeptical. They all assumed Liam and Isabella were poised to secure the deal of the year, none of them realizing the truth. None of them realizing that deal was already dead. Lucas, my CFO, nudged my arm slightly as he passed by, his eyes filled with amusement. They still don't know, he muttered under his breath. Not yet, I said, taking a sip of my drink. But they will. As I moved closer to Liam and Isabella's circle, Liam's voice carried over the chatter. This deal is practically signed, he was saying, his usual cocky grin in place. Carter Holdings knows what's at stake. They need this investment just as much as we do. A few of the executives laughed, nodding in agreement. Isabella smiled, resting her hand lightly on Liam's arm. Once the final signatures are in place, Preston Holdings will be untouchable, she added smoothly. I chuckled to myself. Untouchable. Liam's gaze flickered toward me then, and for a brief moment, there was no recognition in his eyes. He saw just another businessman at the event, someone he didn't care to acknowledge. But then Isabella followed his gaze and froze. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I saw it immediately, the flicker of panic. Liam frowned, glancing between us. Something wrong, babe? Isabella quickly masked her expression, forcing a tight smile. Nothing, she said too quickly, dropping her gaze. Liam barely paid it any mind, already turning back to his conversation. But Isabella? She kept glancing at me from the corner of her eye, her mind racing. She knew something was off. I let them stew in their ignorance for a while longer, mingling, exchanging pleasantries with other industry leaders, all while keeping them in my peripheral vision. Then came the moment that changed everything. Liam, emboldened by alcohol and his own arrogance, noticed me standing nearby and smirked. Well, if it isn't the guy lurking in the shadows. The surrounding group chuckled. I merely raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. He lifted his glass and mock toast. Enjoying the party, mister? I smiled. Carter. The laughter died. Liam's smirk wavered, confusion flickering across his face. What? The realization dawned on Isabella first, and I saw it in her expression. the horror of putting the pieces together too late. Noah Carter, I said smoothly, letting my name settle over them like a thundercloud. CEO of Carter Holdings. The blood drained from Liam's face. His voice cracked, disbelief written all over him. The murmurs around us grew louder as people caught on to what was happening. I could see the whispers traveling through the crowd, heads turning, confusion giving way to amusement as the truth spread like wildfire. Liam swallowed, trying to recover. Well, that's quite the surprise. He forced a chuckle. Didn't expect to see you in this position. I took a slow sip of my drink. Clearly, the discomfort in his posture was delicious. But he wasn't about to back down. Not yet. Instead, he did what insecure men do best when they feel threatened. He lashed out. With a sudden, exaggerated smirk, he turned to Isabella. You know, babe, I never understood why you wasted your time with certain people. I knew what he was doing, trying to reestablish control, trying to turn the situation into a joke at my expense. I remained calm, watching him, letting him dig his own grave. And then, in front of the entire room, he did something I didn't expect. Liam grabbed a nearby glass of water, lifted it with a sneer, and threw it in my face. The cold liquid splashed over me, dripping down my face and onto my suit. The entire ballroom fell silent. A stunned hush settled over the crowd, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. No one could believe what had just happened. Liam stood there, smug, thinking he had just humiliated me in front of the city's most powerful people. I exhaled slowly, wiping my face with my hand. Then, in the calmest, steadiest voice, I said, "Then our $20 billion deal is off. Effective immediately." The silence deepened. Liam's smirk evaporated. What? I pulled my phone from my pocket, pressed a button, and let the room hear what I had been waiting for. A high-ranking Carter Holdings investor's voice echoed over the speakers. If Noah Carter doesn't approve this deal, we're pulling out of Preston Holdings entirely. Isabella's breath hitched. The air turned ice cold. Liam's hands trembled. Wait, hold on. I pocketed my phone and adjusted my suit, still damp from the water. You think you hold all the cards, Liam? My voice was low, controlled. You think you're the king of the room? I stepped forward, my presence towering over him. You thought Carter Holdings needed this deal? I let a slow, amused smile spread across my lips. You had it backwards. Isabella looked like she wanted to disappear. Liam? He just stood there, shaking his head, unable to comprehend the catastrophe unfolding before him. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice just enough that only they could hear. I built myself from the ground up. You inherited your power. I let the weight of my words settle. And now, I'm taking it away. Then, without another word, I turned on my heel and walked away. Behind me, the whispers erupted into full-blown chaos. For a moment, the entire ballroom stood still. The weight of my words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The same executives who had been laughing with Liam minutes ago were now frozen, their expressions ranging from shock to pure disbelief. Liam's face had lost all color, his usual arrogance replaced with something foreign. Fear. Isabella. She didn't even breathe. I could see the calculations running through her mind, the slow realization that everything she had built, everything she had left me for, was crumbling right in front of her. The $20 billion deal. The deal that was supposed to solidify Preston Holdings as an untouchable empire was gone. And worse, everyone in the room had just witnessed it. I turned, walking away from them with slow, deliberate steps, the murmur of hushed whispers already rising behind me. I could hear people piecing it together, the questions flying between them. Noah Carter? As in Carter Holdings? He was married to Isabella, wasn't he? Wait, does that mean, was he the one in charge all along? Lucas caught up with me near the bar, his lips twitching with amusement. That was brutal, he murmured under his breath. I took a slow sip of my drink. Not brutal enough. Lucas let out a short laugh, shaking his head. You do realize he's about to come undone in front of the entire city, right? I glanced back toward Liam, who still hadn't moved, his whiskey glass trembling in his grip. Isabella had turned toward him, whispering something urgent in his ear, but he wasn't listening. He was too busy watching his world fall apart. Good, I said simply. The power in the room had shifted. People were no longer looking at Liam. They were looking at me. And Liam? He could feel it. He could feel the eyes on him. Feel the way people were already starting to distance themselves, sensing the collapse before it even happened. The panic in his expression was unmistakable. I turned back to my drink, content to let the consequences unfold. But then, he snapped. You think this is over? Liam's voice rang out across the ballroom, raw and desperate. The whispers died. Slowly, I turned to face him, raising an eyebrow. Liam shoved his drink onto the table, the glass tipping over, spilling golden liquid across the expensive linens. His hands curled into fists at his sides as he glared at me, shaking with rage. You think you can walk in here and humiliate me? He spat. You think you can just take away my deal? I tilted my head. I don't think, Liam. I know. His nostrils flared. His entire body trembled with barely contained fury. Isabella, realizing how bad this was getting, grabbed his arm. Liam, stop, she whispered urgently. This isn't the place. But Liam wasn't listening. He ripped his arm from her grasp and took a step forward, jabbing a finger in my direction. You were nothing when she left you, he hissed. Nothing. And now you think you're better than me? I let the insult roll off me, unimpressed. No, Liam. I met his furious gaze head-on, unshaken, unmoved. I don't think I'm better than you. I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough for the words to cut deeper. I know I am. The room erupted. There were gasps, murmurs. The tension in the air was thick, electric. Liam lost it. His face twisted in pure rage, and for a moment, I genuinely thought he was about to throw a punch. His hands twitched at his sides, his body vibrating with unchecked emotion. But then, he realized where he was. He realized who was watching. Investors, executives, media. People who had, just minutes ago, been his allies. Now they weren't so sure. I could see it in their faces. Doubt, hesitation. Liam's downfall wasn't happening behind closed doors. It was happening in public, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. His breathing was ragged, his face flushed with humiliation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he let out a short, bitter laugh. You'll regret this, he muttered, his voice venomous. I held his gaze, calm, unbothered. I don't regret much, Liam, and I sure as hell won't regret this. Liam clenched his jaw so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. He turned abruptly, pushing past the onlookers as he stormed out of the ballroom. Isabella hesitated, torn between following him and staying to salvage her reputation. But she knew. She knew it was too late. Her perfect world was shattered. And as she turned her eyes back to me, something flickered in her gaze. Not anger. Not even hatred. Regret. I watched as she exhaled shakily, then turned on her heel and followed Liam out of the ballroom. The moment they disappeared, the whispers began again. But this time, they were louder. Lucas grinned, lifting his drink toward me in a silent toast. That, he said, was legendary. I merely took another sip of my whiskey, unfazed. Because this was only the beginning. Liam Preston thought he had power. He thought he was untouchable. But tonight, he learned the truth. He had never been the one in control. And now, he had everything to lose. Liam Preston's downfall didn't happen gradually. It happened all at once. By the time I stepped into my office the next morning, the impact of last night's disaster was already sending shockwaves through the business world. Preston Holdings' stock price plummeted by 30% within hours. Major investors panicked and started pulling their funds. Financial news outlets were calling it the most public business humiliation of the year. And I hadn't even done anything yet. I sat at my desk, scrolling through the latest headlines as Lucas entered my office, a cup of coffee in his hand and a smirk on his face. You've officially ruined the man, and it hasn't even been 24 hours. I chuckled, setting my phone down. He ruined himself. I just gave him the push. Lucas sat across from me, shaking his head. The board at Preston Holdings is in a complete frenzy. Half of them are blaming him for losing the Carter Holdings deal, and the other half is trying to figure out how to salvage their sinking ship. I leaned back in my chair, completely at ease. Let me guess. They're scrambling to secure another investor? Lucas nodded. They reached out to one of their biggest stakeholders this morning. But, he grinned, turns out they don't have the confidence in Liam anymore. They're looking for an exit strategy instead. I exhaled slowly, feeling nothing but satisfaction. Liam had spent years convincing everyone around him that he was untouchable, that his success was inevitable. But now, with one deal gone, the cracks in his empire were becoming impossible to ignore. And it was only getting worse. Lucas tossed a folder onto my desk. You might want to take a look at this. I flipped it open, my eyes scanning the documents inside. It was worse than I thought. Liam hadn't just lost the Carter Holdings investment. His reckless spending and mismanagement were finally catching up to him. Police Starlight, he had been using company funds to finance his lifestyle. Police Starlight, he had been making high-risk investments without proper board approval. Police Starlight, and now, with no financial cushion to fall back on, his company was bleeding out. I let out a low whistle. It's amazing how quickly everything crumbles when you take away their safety net. Lucas chuckled. I think he's still in denial. He probably thinks he can smooth-talk his way out of this. I shook my head. Not this time. I had spent years watching men like Liam Preston, men who climbed to the top on nothing but arrogance and deception. They believed that if they acted like winners long enough, the world would never see them fall. But the truth? The moment you strip away the illusion, all they have left is panic. And right on cue, my phone rang. I didn't even have to check the caller ID. I knew exactly who it was. Lucas grinned. I'm guessing it's the man himself? I nodded, answering the call. Liam. The voice on the other end was unsteady, but he was still trying, still clinging to whatever was left of his bravado. Noah, Liam said, forcing a chuckle that sounded far too strained to be natural. Look, about last night, things got a little out of hand. I think we both know that. I leaned back in my chair, amused. He was already trying to backpedal. Did they? I asked casually, because from where I was standing, everything went exactly as it should have. Liam exhaled sharply. Noah, listen. We don't have to be enemies here. I was out of line at the gala. I can't admit that. But business is business. We both know how the game is played. I let the silence stretch for a moment, let him sweat. Then, finally, I spoke. Is that why your investors are pulling out? Liam inhaled sharply. I had struck a nerve. I don't know what you're talking about, he muttered. Come on, Liam, I said, my voice calm. I know everything. Your stock price is in free fall, your board is turning against you, and now, your biggest stakeholders are looking for an exit. Another stretch of silence. Then, Liam finally cracked. You think you're so damn smart, don't you? He hissed. I smiled. No, Liam. I know I am. His breathing was ragged on the other end. He was furious, desperate. You want to know what your problem is, Noah? Liam spat. You act like you're above everyone else, like you're untouchable. But let me tell you something, you're not. I chuckled. Funny. That's exactly what people used to say about you. Liam lost it. You think you won? This isn't over, Carter. You might have embarrassed me, but I'm still standing. I shook my head. Not for long. I didn't respond, just let his own frustration fill the silence. And then, he hung up. Lucas raised an eyebrow. That was fun. I exhaled slowly, setting my phone down. He's unraveling. Lucas smirked. And it's only the beginning. We both knew it. Liam wasn't just dealing with a public embarrassment. He was about to lose everything. And the best part? I didn't even have to lift a finger. Liam Preston was a man who thrived on control. He built his entire image around the illusion of power, walking into rooms as if he owned them, speaking as if his words dictated the economy, and treating people as if they were beneath him. But today, for the first time, Liam Preston was powerless. By the time the sun set, Preston Holdings was in free fall. Their stock had dropped another 15% by mid-afternoon. Major investors had called an emergency board meeting. Whispers of financial fraud had reached the SEC, triggering an early-stage investigation. And Liam? He was drowning. I sat in my office, watching it unfold from a distance, listening as my team gave me the latest updates. Lucas, ever the bearer of amusing news, leaned against my desk with his tablet in hand, smirking. "The board is voting tonight," he said, shaking his head. "They're going to push him out." I leaned back in my chair, completely relaxed. Took them long enough. Lucas let out a short laugh. "They're ruthless when they smell blood. And Liam? He's bleeding out fast." I wasn't surprised. The moment confidence in a leader faltered, the sharks always circled. And Liam had made too many enemies along the way. Still, I knew men like him. He wouldn't go down without a fight. He would cling to whatever scraps of power he had left, refuse to accept the reality staring him in the face. And that's exactly what happened. At precisely 7:42 p.m., Liam walked into the emergency board meeting. His shoulders were squared, his posture stiff, but his eyes were frantic. He was a man who had never been in this position before. The room was filled with his own board members, men and women he had once commanded with ease. But tonight, they weren't looking at him as their leader. They were looking at him as a liability. "Let's get straight to the point," one of the senior board members said, steepling his fingers. "Liam, we've reviewed the situation, and there's no denying the damage." Liam forced a smile, but it was weak. "Look, I understand there's concern, but this is just a temporary setback. Carter Holdings was never the only option for investment. We can pivot." Silence. No one agreed. Another board member, an older woman with sharp eyes, cleared her throat. "We have reason to believe that your handling of company funds has been questionable." Liam's jaw clenched. "That's ridiculous. Every decision I've made has been in the best interest of this company." The senior board member sighed. "Liam, the SEC has already started preliminary inquiries into our financial records. If there's even a hint of fraud, we'll all be held responsible." Liam's hands tightened into fists. "You're throwing me under the bus? After everything I've done for this company?" "This company," the man said, voice cool, "is bigger than you." And just like that, the reality hit him. Liam was no longer the king. He was expendable. The final blow came from his most trusted ally, his own CFO, Mark Bennett. Mark had been Liam's right-hand man for years, the one who covered for him, who helped smooth over his reckless financial choices. But tonight, when Liam turned to him for support, Mark stood with the board. "It's over, Liam," Mark said, his voice even. "The vote is unanimous. The board has decided. You're out?" Liam staggered back. "No," he whispered. "No, you can't do this." "We just did," Mark said. "Your resignation will be announced first thing in the morning." The room fell into silence. Liam was finished. His breath came in shallow gasps, his entire body stiff as he processed the fact that he had lost everything. And then, his phone buzzed. He looked down, his face contorting as he saw the name flashing on the screen. Isabella, his wife, his last remaining ally. Liam picked up the call, voice sharp. "Where the hell are you?" Isabella's voice trembled on the other end. "Liam, we need to talk." "Talk?" He laughed bitterly, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I just got betrayed by my own board, and you want to talk?" There was a long pause. Then, softly, "Liam, I'm leaving." His world stopped. "What?" His voice was barely a whisper. "I packed my things," Isabella continued, her voice strangely emotionless. "I'm moving out tonight." Liam gripped the phone tighter. "You're joking." "I'm not." Liam let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You're leaving me? Now? After everything?" "I can't stay," Isabella said simply. "It's over." Liam's breath hitched. "No," he whispered, shaking his head even though she couldn't see him. "No, you don't get to walk away. Not now." Isabella exhaled slowly. "You know what I realized, Liam?" Silence. "Then, I left the wrong man." That was it. That was the moment Liam broke. Because he knew. He knew exactly who she meant. "Noah," he rasped. Isabella didn't deny it. Instead, she simply said, "Goodbye, Liam." And then, just like that, she hung up. Liam stood there, the phone still pressed against his ear, his entire world collapsing around him. The company? Gone. His reputation? Destroyed. His wife? Leaving. He had lost everything. And the worst part? It was all his fault. It was late when my phone rang. The office was quiet, most of my employees having left hours ago, but I remained behind, reviewing final reports and watching the inevitable collapse of Preston Holdings unfold in real time. I knew who it was before I even checked the screen. Isabella. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the name flashing on my phone. It had been years since she had called me. Years since she had even acknowledged my existence outside of the professional world. And now? Now, she had no one left. I let it ring twice more before finally answering, keeping my voice calm, controlled. Isabella. A shaky breath. Noah. Her voice wavered, as if she had rehearsed this moment in her head 1,000 times, but still couldn't find the right words. I said nothing, waiting. I made a mistake, she finally whispered. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how predictable it was. Of course, she would come back now. Not when I was struggling. Not when I was still building. Not when I was the man she deemed unworthy. Now that Liam was gone. Now that her perfect world had shattered. Now that she had nowhere else to turn. I exhaled slowly, glancing at the city skyline through my window. What do you want, Isabella? She hesitated. Liam is gone, she admitted. The board forced him out. His assets are frozen. He has nothing left. And I heard her swallow, the shame thick in her silence. I need help, Noah. There it was. I should have felt some kind of satisfaction, some kind of twisted pleasure in hearing her beg, but I didn't. I only felt indifference. Years ago, her leaving had shattered me. It had burned through my pride, my trust, and my love until nothing was left. But time had done its job. I had rebuilt. I had become more. And now, she was nothing but a voice from the past. I let the silence stretch between us, making her sit with her own words. Noah, she whispered, voice trembling. Please. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my desk. What do you want, Isabella? I don't know what to do. She let out a shaky breath. Liam ruined everything. The house is being taken. Our accounts are frozen. I have nothing left. I smiled to myself. She wasn't calling because she regretted leaving me. She was calling because she regretted choosing wrong. I rubbed my jaw, feigning consideration. Let me get this straight. You left me for a man you thought was better, built a life with him, looked down on me while I was working for everything I have. And now that he's fallen, you think I'll just, what? Save you? Her breath hitched. Noah, it's not like that. Isn't it? I cut her off, my voice steady. Tell me, Isabella, if Liam was still rich, still powerful, would you be calling me right now? The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. She had no answer. I chuckled, shaking my head. That's what I thought. Noah, she whispered, her voice breaking. I know I don't deserve anything from you. I know I made mistakes. But she inhaled shakily. I was wrong about you. I see that now. I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling. Took you long enough. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. Yeah. For the first time since the call began, I heard something real in her voice. Regret. Not just for what had happened with Liam, but for everything. She had miscalculated. She had thought that wealth was the only thing that mattered. That leaving me for Liam was the smart move. But wealth meant nothing without character, without intelligence, without resilience. She had chosen the wrong man. And now, she had to live with that. I exhaled slowly. Isabella, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't hate you. I stopped caring a long time ago. Silence. I continued. You were a part of my past. But that's all you are now. The past. Her breath hitched again. I could picture her standing in some dimly lit apartment or a half-empty hotel room, staring at the walls, realizing that this was it. That there was no going back. Noah, she whispered. I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. Then, in the same calm, even tone, I said the words she never thought she would hear from me. That's not my problem. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear her breathing, could feel the weight of her realization settling over her like an iron blanket. There was no saving her this time. There was no second chance. She had made her choice years ago, and I had made mine. I hope you figure it out, I added simply. And then I hung up. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at my phone. Then, slowly, a small, satisfied smile crossed my lips. Because for the first time in years, I felt free. The cafe was small, tucked away on a quiet street just outside the city's financial district. The kind of place that catered to professionals who wanted discretion, where meetings were held over overpriced coffee and whispered conversations. I sat at a table near the window, watching the world outside. The people walking past, the sound of distant traffic, the low hum of chatter from the other patrons. It was a peaceful contrast to the storm that had been brewing for the past few days. Then, the door opened, and she walked in. Isabella. She looked different. The perfectly curated image she had always maintained was gone. No designer clothes, no sparkling jewelry, no expensive perfume filling the air around her. Instead, she wore a simple beige coat over a plain blouse and jeans. She looked ordinary, and for the first time in her life, she probably felt it too. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. For a moment, she just stood there, hesitating, like she was still deciding whether she could go through with this. Then, slowly, she walked over and took the seat across from me. "Hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a sip of my coffee. "Isabella." She folded her hands in front of her, fidgeting slightly. I noticed the way she kept glancing at my face, as if searching for something. Recognition, warmth, a remnant of the man she once knew. But there was nothing left for her to find. "I appreciate you meeting me," she said, forcing a small, nervous smile. "I wasn't sure if you would." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "Why are we here, Isabella?" Her fingers clenched around her coffee cup. I needed to see you." I didn't respond. I let her fill the silence. She sighed, looking down at the table. After the call, I couldn't stop thinking about everything. About us. About how things ended. She looked up again, her eyes searching mine. "I regret it, Noah. Leaving you. Thinking Liam was the better choice." I raised an eyebrow. "The better choice? You didn't just think it. You were certain." She flinched slightly, but nodded. "I know. And I was wrong." I remained quiet. She took a deep breath. "I let greed blind me. I thought success was about having the biggest house, the most expensive clothes, the perfect lifestyle. And when I saw you, back then, struggling, trying to build something that wasn't guaranteed, I got scared." She exhaled shakily. "I didn't believe in you the way I should have." I tapped my fingers against the table, watching her. "And now?" Her lips parted slightly. "Now, I see who you really are." I chuckled, shaking my head. "No, Isabella. You see what I've become. There's a difference." She swallowed, her hands tightening around her cup. "Maybe, but I miss you, Noah." I let the words settle between us, unfazed. Then, I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm. "Tell me something, Isabella. If Liam had never lost everything, would you be sitting here right now?" She froze. Her eyes darted away, her body stiffening. I nodded, a slow, knowing smirk crossing my lips. "That's what I thought." She inhaled sharply. "It's not like that." I tilted my head. "Isn't it? Let's be honest here, Isabella. You only miss me because you lost. If Liam's company had continued to thrive, if you were still living in that mansion, still wearing your designer clothes, still sipping champagne at fancy galas, you wouldn't have thought about me once." Her breath caught in her throat. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. I gave her a small, almost pitying smile. "You don't miss me. You miss the fact that I ended up winning. And now, you want to rewrite history. You want to pretend that you would have chosen differently if you had known how things would turn out." I leaned back in my chair. "But that's the thing about choices, Isabella. You don't get to change them just because you don't like the outcome." Tears welled in her eyes. "Noah, please." There was a time when hearing her beg would have meant something, would have hurt. But now? Now, I felt nothing. I exhaled slowly, glancing out the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. A fitting end. Then, I turned back to her, my expression unreadable. I don't do second chances. Her breath hitched. She blinked rapidly, her lips parting in disbelief. Noah. She had assumed I would take her back. She had thought that maybe, just maybe, she could say the right things, or the right regret, and I would fall back into her arms. But I wasn't that man anymore. I had been willing to love her once. I had been willing to fight for her. But that door had closed the moment she walked away. Her fingers trembled as she set her coffee down. She stared at me, realization dawning over her like a slow, painful burn. I thought, she let out a broken laugh. I thought you'd still be waiting for me. I didn't even blink. I wasn't. Her shoulders slumped, the weight of her choices finally crushing her. For years, she had believed she had won, that she had made the right decision, that I was the one who had lost. But now, she knew the truth. I stood up, pulling a few bills from my wallet and tossing them onto the table. Take care, Isabella. She watched me, her eyes filled with things she would never be able to say. Regret, shame, loss. I walked out of the cafe without looking back, because the past no longer mattered. Only the future did. As I stepped out of the cafe, the cool evening air greeted me like an old friend. The sky was painted in hues of deep orange and fading blue, the last remnants of daylight stretching across the city skyline. It was quiet out here, peaceful in a way that mirrored my own mind. For the first time in years, I felt weightless. Isabella was gone, not just physically, but in every sense that mattered. She no longer occupied space in my life. No more lingering thoughts about the past. No more questioning whether I had been enough. No more waiting. I walked toward my car, slipping my hands into my pockets as my mind replayed everything that had led to this moment. I had built something out of nothing. I had turned loss into power. I had become the man she never believed I could be. And I had done it all without her. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Lucas. I smirked, already knowing what this was about. Tell me it's official, I said as I answered. Oh, it's official, Lucas replied, amusement dripping from his voice. Preston Holdings is done. Their stock just hit rock bottom, and their biggest investors have publicly announced they're pulling out. I chuckled, shaking my head. That was faster than I expected. Liam didn't give them much of a choice. The moment the board kicked him out, the media tore him apart. Turns out, people don't take too kindly to reckless CEOs who lose $20 billion in potential investments. I opened my car door, sliding into the driver's seat as I leaned back. And Isabella? Lucas let out a low whistle. Last I heard, she packed up and disappeared. Guess she figured out pretty quickly that no one wants to be associated with a sinking ship. I wasn't surprised. Isabella had always been a survivalist first and foremost. She clung to power, to wealth, to anything that ensured she was on the winning side. But what happens when there's nowhere left to run? Lucas hesitated before speaking again. She called me, you know. I frowned slightly. What? Yeah, not long after she called you. She asked if there was a way to, I don't know, fix things, to at least rebuild her reputation. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. Even now, she was looking for a way out. What did you tell her? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Lucas laughed. I told her she was talking to the wrong person. I smirked. Good. There was a short pause. Then Lucas asked, more serious this time, so, how do you feel? I thought about it. About everything. About the past few years. About the moments that had tested me. About the man I had become because of it. And for the first time, my answer was simple. Free. Lucas chuckled. That's what I figured. I glanced out the windshield, watching as the city lights flickered to life one by one. We should celebrate. Already ahead of you. The team's at the lounge downtown. You in? I smiled. Yeah, I'm in. After hanging up, I sat there for a moment, letting the silence settle over me. This was it. This was the moment where the past finally stopped mattering. I wasn't the man Isabella had left behind anymore. I wasn't the underdog. I wasn't chasing revenge. I had one. And more than that, I had moved on. With a quiet exhale, I started the car and drove toward the future. My future. 2 years had passed since I signed those divorce papers and left everything behind. Selena, the lies, the apartment we fought over, even the silver sedan I used to drive. I started over in a quiet neighborhood, a modest one-story house with an overgrown lawn and a coffee maker that always needed fixing. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. And peace, after what I'd been through, was gold. The day started like any other. I'd just come back from the gym, sweat still clinging to my shirt, when the knock came. Not the kind of knock you get from neighbors asking to borrow sugar. No, this was sharp, deliberate, and loud enough to make my heart thud in my chest. I looked through the peephole and blinked. Red and blue lights flashed behind two uniformed officers on my porch. My mind immediately sprinted through every possible explanation: parking tickets, identity theft, wrong house. I opened the door slowly, cautious. "Can I help you?" The taller officer stepped forward. "Are you Leo Carter?" "Yes." He exchanged a look with his partner before continuing. "Sir, we have a situation. A child was found abandoned in a vehicle registered in your name. We need you to come with us." I froze. "A child? No, that's not possible. I don't have a child." His tone didn't change. "Sir, I'm afraid we need you to come down to the station. You're currently listed as the legal owner of the vehicle. We're placing you under arrest until we can sort things out." The words hit me like a slap. Wait. What? This is some kind of mistake. I haven't owned that car in 2 years. My ex-wife took it in the divorce, checked the records. But it didn't matter. They read me my rights, cuffed me right there on my porch in broad daylight, and led me to the back of the cruiser. Neighbors peeked through curtains. One woman across the street paused mid-dog walk. I stared down at my shoes and tried not to scream. At the station, I sat in an interview room under flickering fluorescent lights, my wrists sore from the cuffs. An officer placed a manila folder on the table and slid it toward me. The child was found in a silver 2008 sedan, still registered in your name. License plate traced back to this address. I shook my head, trying to focus. That car. Selena took it. I haven't driven it since the divorce. She was supposed to re-register it. I assumed she did. Why would she leave a child in there? The officer leaned back. "That's what we'd like to know." I ran a hand down my face. "Where's the child now?" "Taken to the ER. Mild dehydration, some bruising, scared out of his mind, but stable. They found a name tag in his backpack. Said his name is Jaden." The name meant nothing to me at the time. I was too busy cycling through panic, shame, confusion. Every corner of my life, I'd rebuilt carefully, brick by emotional brick, and now this. A child. My name. An arrest. After hours of questioning and verifying my story, they finally let me go, but not without a warning. "You're not off the hook," one officer said. "Until we know more, you're still involved. That car's in your name, and the child may be connected to you." I walked out into the early evening, air thick with heat and tension. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a dozen missed calls from unknown numbers, a voicemail from Selena's mother. I ignored them all. I drove to the hospital, my stomach in knots, the name Jaden echoing in my mind like a song I didn't recognize but couldn't shake. The pediatric ward smelled like antiseptic and sadness. A nurse led me down a hallway lined with cartoon murals. I wasn't sure what I expected, but when I stepped into the room, I stopped cold. There he was. A boy, maybe 4 or 5, small for his age. Curly hair, tear-streaked cheeks, oversized t-shirt. He sat up in the hospital bed, clutching a juice box, his eyes locked on me the moment I entered. And I don't know how else to say it, he looked like me. Like I was looking back at a version of myself that had shrunk with time. The nurse leaned in and whispered, "He doesn't talk much. Keeps asking for someone named Selena." But when we told him your name, he looked comforted. I took a step forward. My breath caught. "Hey, buddy," I said gently, unsure why I even said it that way. "My name's Leo." His eyes didn't move from mine. He didn't speak, just blinked. I swallowed hard. "I'm gonna find out what's going on, okay? I promise." In that sterile hospital room, with the machines beeping and the scent of hand sanitizer curling through the air, everything I thought I knew about my life collapsed. Jaden was real. He was here. And if he was who I was starting to fear he might be, then nothing about my past with Selena was over. The hospital hallway was too quiet. That kind of quiet that doesn't come with peace but with pressure. I stood outside the pediatric room, hands clenched, replaying the officer's words in my head like a broken loop. The boy was found crying in the back seat of an old silver sedan. Registered to you. That car had been mine once. Technically still was, I guess. But it hadn't seen my driveway in years. After Selena and I divorced, she got the sedan, and I never looked back. She promised she'd handle the transfer. Apparently, promises didn't mean much to her anymore. The nurse walked out of the room and gave me a look, a mix of professional calm and personal concern. He's stable. Shaken, a bit dehydrated. No broken bones. He's been checked top to bottom. Physically, he'll be okay. Then she leaned in a little and lowered her voice. Emotionally, that's different. He hasn't said much, but he asks for his mom every hour. Then he goes quiet again. Selena? I asked. The nurse nodded. That's the name he says. You know her? I didn't answer right away. What could I say? That she was my ex-wife? That we hadn't spoken in over 2 years? That she'd vanished with some guy she claimed was everything I wasn't? I just nodded slowly and whispered, yeah. I know her. She gave me a clipboard with some forms to sign, then gently gestured for me to enter the room. I stepped in slowly, my breath hitching as I laid eyes on the boy again. He was sitting upright now, knees pulled to his chest, fingers fiddling with a thread on the hospital blanket. His face was pale, cheeks blotched from crying. But what stopped me in my tracks was his eyes, deep brown, wide, and haunted. Familiar. He looked up at me, and for a second, the room disappeared. It was like looking into a photograph I hadn't taken, but somehow remembered. The curve of his nose, the shape of his jaw. There was a resemblance that chilled me, and confused me, and terrified me all at once. I sat in the plastic chair next to his bed. My voice came out more fragile than I intended. Hi. He blinked at me. No response. My name's Leo. Nothing. But he didn't look away. I heard your name is Jaden. His tiny head gave the faintest nod. It was barely perceptible, but it was there. A spark. A recognition. That's a strong name, I added. You like it? Another pause. Then a whisper. My mom picked it. Of course she did. That woman could script a life and walk away from it like a movie premiere she was too good to attend. My mouth went dry. Do you know where your mom is now? He shook his head. That one hit different. I looked over at the nightstand, where a small stuffed lion had been placed beside a juice box and crackers. Someone had tried to comfort him. It wasn't enough. They said you were in a car, I continued. Do you remember that? His face twisted. He didn't speak. His little hands tightened on the blanket. I leaned in just slightly. It's okay. You don't have to talk about it. I'm just trying to understand what happened. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, just when I started to think I should stop asking, he whispered. I was hot. I cried. Nobody came. I swallowed hard, heart punching the inside of my ribs. I'm sorry that happened, Jaden. You didn't deserve that. No one does. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a split second, his eyes searched mine, like they were trying to remember something they'd never been told. Something buried deep in blood. Do you know my mom? He asked again, his voice softer now, trembling. I nodded slowly. Yeah. A long time ago, we were close. Are you my daddy? The words hit harder than I expected. I hadn't prepared for them. I didn't even know how to process them. My throat tightened. I couldn't lie, but I couldn't confirm what I didn't know. So I told him the truth. I don't know yet, Jaden, but I'm going to find out. He looked down, like he didn't know whether to be relieved or scared. Maybe both. I reached out, gently, and placed my hand on the edge of his blanket. Not a touch, just proximity. He didn't pull away. I'm going to be here for you, okay? I said, until we figure all of this out. You're not alone anymore. He didn't reply. But when the nurse came in to check on him, Jaden did something small, something that I wouldn't forget. He reached out and tugged lightly on my sleeve. Like he wanted me to stay. Like, for the first time in a while, someone staying meant something. I stayed. For the rest of that night, I stayed. In a plastic chair with an aching back, unanswered questions, and a kid who might be mine. My old life was behind me. But something bigger, something heavier, was just beginning. And his name was Jaden. Jaden. The name hit me like a kick to the chest the moment the nurse said it. I had to sit down. My legs gave out on me, right there in the hallway outside the pediatric room. The name wasn't just familiar, it was sacred. Not something you hear on the street and forget 5 minutes later. It was the name Selena, and I used to whisper late at night when we were still pretending our future was real. When we still made lists of baby names, clinging to each syllable like it was a promise. Jaden had been our top choice. Back when we talked about kids as if they were inevitable, not optional. We even joked once about him inheriting my crooked smile and her thick black hair. That was before everything soured. Before lies piled up in quiet corners of our home. Before the pregnancy that never came, or so I thought. Now here I was, in a hospital hallway with that name slicing through my past like a jagged blade. I stood up and walked back into the room. Jaden was coloring quietly on a piece of printer paper the nurse had given him. The lion plush sat in his lap like a guardian. I moved closer, slower this time, careful not to spook him. He looked up at me. No words. Just those eyes again. You feeling a little better? I asked, gently. A nod. I pulled the chair closer to the bed and lowered myself into it, elbows on my knees, heart pounding. Can I ask you something? He paused, then gave another slow nod. Do you know your mom's full name? He bit his bottom lip. Selena Carter. Carter. She never changed her last name after the divorce. That detail shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. I wasn't sure if I was shaking from shock or rage or fear, but I tried to steady myself. Do you know your last name? Jaden Carter, he answered without hesitation. I had to look away, stare at the wall. Something. My chest ached in places I didn't know still worked. You're doing great, buddy, I managed to say. Thanks for telling me that. He smiled, just barely. And that smile, damn it, it was mine. Not just metaphorically. I'd seen that exact smirk in the mirror after pulling off a good joke. I felt the blood drain from my face. All I could think was, how? How could Selena have hidden this from me? I stepped out into the hallway, heart slamming. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through contacts I hadn't touched in years until I found her mother's number. I hesitated, then hit call. It rang once, twice. Then she picked up. Leo. The voice was instantly familiar, tired, older now, but definitely hers. I need answers, I said flatly. There's a boy here. His name is Jaden. Looks just like me. He says Selena is his mother. And guess what? The car he was found in? The one she left him in? It's still registered to me. Her silence spoke volumes. I need to know the truth, I continued, jaw tight. Is he mine? Her breath hitched on the other end. Leo, I didn't know she hadn't told you. I thought you knew. Knew what? That she had a son. With me. There was a pause so long I thought she'd hung up. Then came the quiet answer. Yes. The hallway wobbled around me. I braced my hand on the wall. Selena didn't want you to know, she whispered. She said it would complicate things. Said you were too focused on your job, your career, that you weren't ready. She was scared you'd leave her. She left me, I snapped. She cheated. She walked away. She gutted my life and left me with nothing but a couch and a storage bill. And you're telling me she also took my son? Her voice cracked. She didn't handle it well. She kept thinking she'd tell you one day. But then she met that man, the one she left with. And when that fell apart, she couldn't cope. She wasn't in her right mind. Leo, that doesn't explain leaving a child, her child, in a locked car in the middle of summer. I know, she said, tears audible now. I know. I told her it was unforgivable. But she was desperate. She said she was going to leave him with you. Said she parked near your address. She parked 4 blocks away. No note. No call. Just left him. I'm sorry, Leo. I really am. I hung up. I didn't trust myself to keep talking. When I stepped back into the hospital room, Jaden was asleep. His head rested against the lion plush. The nurse was dimming the lights. He okay? I asked. She nodded. He'll need a lot of support. But he's resilient. And he seems to like you. I stared at him for a long time. My son. I didn't have the test results yet, but I knew. My gut knew. My bones knew. And I hated that I'd been robbed of those 4 years. His first words. His first steps. His first everything. I leaned closer, whispering into the quiet. I should have known about you, kid. I'm sorry I didn't. But I'm here now. And I won't leave. Ever. Jaden stirred, but didn't wake. I sat down again and kept watch, not as a stranger anymore, but as a man on the edge of fatherhood. It was just past midnight when my phone rang. I'd been sitting in the dark hospital room for hours, watching Jaden sleep. The steady beep of machines blended with the hum of the air conditioning, but that call sliced through the stillness like a scalpel. I didn't recognize the number, but something in my gut told me to answer. My voice was low, cautious. Hello? Leo. The voice on the other end was frantic, breaking apart between sobs. It took me a second to place it. Selena's mother, Marissa. I stood, stepping into the hallway, lowering my voice. Marissa. Oh, God, Leo. I just found out. I didn't know she's Selena. She said she was leaving Jaden with you. She said you'd understand. She left him in a car, Marissa. A car. In the heat. Alone. My words came out sharper than I meant, but the rage had been building. She didn't tell me anything. The only reason I found out is because the car's still registered in my name, and the police arrested me. I know. I'm so sorry, she cried. Selena didn't tell anyone where she was going. I thought she was with her boyfriend, but he left her, took all their money and ran. She had no job, no home. She's been living out of motels. She's not okay. I closed my eyes. Not okay is one thing. Abandoning a child is another. She panicked. Leo, Marissa whispered. She said she left Jaden at your house. No, she didn't. She left him in the back of a car with no note. That boy sat there, scared and sweating, crying until someone found him. That's not panic. That's negligence. Silence. Is he? Her voice trembled. Is he okay? He will be. But he's not asking for her. Not once. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven. She didn't know what else to do. She said she couldn't take care of him anymore, that she was ruining his life. She thought if she left him with you, he'd be better off. And she never thought to ask me? To call me? To give me a damn chance? I was pacing now, my heart a war drum. She stole 4 years of my son's life from me. She made that decision on her own. I know, Marissa murmured. But please, Leo, whatever happens, please don't punish Jaden for her choices. My throat tightened. I wouldn't. I couldn't. I hung up without another word. There was nothing more to say. I turned and stared through the small hospital window into Jaden's room. He was curled beneath the blanket, one hand still holding onto that plush lion, his mouth parted just slightly in sleep. My chest ached. Not just from the betrayal, not just from the loss, but from the sheer weight of what had been thrust into my life. I walked back in and sat beside him again. And for the first time, I let myself feel it all. The disbelief, the fury, the grief, the wonder. My mind kept circling back to the same brutal question. How could she? Selena used to be the kind of woman who cried over sick animals on the side of the road. She used to hum lullabies to plants to help them grow. And yet she had left her own child in a hot car like forgotten luggage. Jaden stirred, blinking groggily. His voice was barely a whisper. Where's Mommy? The question hit me hard. I hesitated, then leaned in close. She's not here right now, buddy. Is she coming back? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to offer comfort wrapped in easy lies. But I couldn't do that to him. He'd already had too much taken from him. I don't know, I said gently. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. He stared at me for a moment, his lip trembling, then crawled into my lap like it was something he'd done 100 times before. He fit there perfectly, like he belonged. I wrapped my arms around him, slowly, afraid I'd break the moment. He buried his face in my chest and let out a soft sigh. Later that night, I stayed with him until dawn. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just held him and thought about all the things I never got to see, his first steps, his first word, the way he must have cried when he realized no one was coming back for him. But I was here now. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want to speak to Selena. I wanted protection for Jaden and for myself. I wanted to make sure no one could take him from me again. And I wanted the truth. Because if I was going to fight for this boy, I needed to know without a shred of doubt that he was mine. Even though deep down, I already knew. The moment I stepped into the law office, it smelled like leather and stress. I hadn't even sat down before the receptionist handed me a clipboard full of forms. I scribbled my name across the top, my mind running on autopilot while everything else inside me churned. I wasn't just some guy walking in with a legal question. I was a man chasing down the truth about a child who might be his. The boy was asleep in the hospital, clutching a stuffed lion like it was armor, and I was here trying to figure out how to protect him from the chaos he'd been born into. The lawyer was calm, buttoned up, mid-40s with steel-gray hair, and the kind of voice that didn't rise unless it had to. His name was Victor Greer. He listened without interrupting, except to scribble notes or raise an eyebrow. I told him everything, how I hadn't known about Jaden, how the police had shown up, how Selena left him in a car that still had my name on it. And I told him about the resemblance. The name. The overwhelming feeling in my gut that I didn't just know this boy. I belonged to him. Victor nodded slowly. You need 2 things. First, a DNA test. Without that, no court's going to grant you custody or protection. Second, once the test confirms paternity, we file for emergency custody. With what Selena did, you might even get full rights. She hasn't even shown up, I muttered. She left him and vanished. He looked me in the eye. Which means the longer she's gone, the more leverage you have. But don't wait. Get the test. Time matters in these cases. I left the office with a folder of paperwork, a referral to a testing clinic, and a sense of direction. I didn't know if I was angry, hopeful, or just tired, but I knew what I had to do. At the hospital, Jaden was coloring again. The nurse had given him a fresh pack of crayons and some drawing paper. He looked up when I walked in, his face lighting up like I was someone who always came back. That alone nearly leveled me. "Hey, bud," I said, setting down a small bag of food. "Got you some nuggets." His eyes widened. "With the red sauce?" "Ketchup, of course." He scrambled toward the tray, but before he dug in, he looked at me and asked, "Do I get to stay with you now?" That question cracked something in me. He asked it so simply, so earnestly, like he wasn't even sure if he was allowed to hope. I sat beside him and gave the only answer I could. "I don't know for sure yet, but I'm going to try. Really hard." He nodded, like that was enough. Like trying meant something to him. Later that afternoon, I took Jaden for the DNA test. It was quick, a cheek swab, some brief paperwork, a waiting room with too bright lighting and silence broken only by cartoons playing on a mounted television. Jaden sat on my lap the whole time, his fingers curled in the fabric of my sleeve. When it was over, the nurse smiled kindly and said, "You'll get your results in 3 days." 3 days. 72 hours. A lifetime. I didn't leave Jaden's side during that stretch. I brought him clean clothes, found him a Spider-Man toothbrush, and made sure the hospital food tray had chocolate pudding with every meal. I read him stories at night and learned he liked books about animals, especially elephants. He flinched at loud noises, didn't like the dark, and always hesitated before asking for anything, like he'd been taught that needs were burdens. And every time I left the room, even just to grab water or talk to a nurse, he'd look at me like he wasn't sure I'd come back. On the 3rd day, my phone buzzed. Victor's voice was steady, clinical. "Leo, we have the results. You're the biological father." Everything stopped. The air thinned. I pressed a hand to my chest like it could keep my heart from breaking apart or flying out. "Are you sure? 100% match." "There's no doubt." I hung up and stood in that hallway for a long time before walking into Jaden's room. He was sitting cross-legged on the bed, flipping through a picture book, his lips silently mouthing the words. I crouched down so we were eye level. "Jaden," I said quietly, and he looked up. "Yeah." I smiled. "That test we did? It says I'm your dad." He stared at me. No immediate grin. No outburst. Just those wide brown eyes looking right into me. Then, after a long beat, he asked, "Does that mean I can stay with you forever?" I nodded, eyes burning. "Yeah, that's exactly what it means." He didn't say anything else. Just leaned forward and wrapped his arms around my neck with a kind of certainty that made my knees go weak. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But in that tiny gesture, everything changed. I wasn't just a man chasing answers anymore. I was his father, and there was no turning back. I didn't know how to be a father. Hell, I barely knew how to be an adult most days. My apartment wasn't built for children. It had sharp corners, cables tangled behind every piece of furniture, and a fridge that contained more beer than groceries. The walls were blank. The guest room was used for storage, and the only kid-friendly thing in my house was a dusty copy of the Lion King DVD that came free with my old TV. But the moment Jaden looked up at me and said, "Do I get to stay with you now?" I knew I couldn't send him anywhere else. The hospital discharged him the day after the DNA results came in. I signed the papers with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, not because I wasn't sure about taking him, but because I was scared of not being enough. What if I failed him like everyone else already had? We drove home in silence, Jaden in the back seat of a borrowed car seat, his lion plush clutched to his chest. Every red light, every quiet moment, I glanced at him in the mirror. He didn't say much, just looked out the window, face unreadable. When we pulled into the parking lot of my apartment, he squinted at the building and asked, "Is this a hotel?" "Nope," I smiled. "It's our place." He followed me upstairs slowly, his tiny backpack bouncing against his shoulders. When I opened the door, I suddenly saw the apartment through his eyes. How empty it was, how cold. No pictures on the wall. No color. No softness. He walked in and stood still, his eyes darting from corner to corner. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door and knelt beside him. "It's not perfect yet," I said honestly, "but we can make it ours. Together." That night, I gave him the guest room. After clearing out 2 suitcases, a box of tangled cords, and a set of dumbbells I hadn't used in a year. I laid down new sheets, found an old lamp in storage, and plugged in a nightlight I bought on the way home. I didn't have much, but I had a start. The first few days were awkward. Jaden was polite to the point of heartbreaking. He said thank you for everything, water, snacks, even when I handed him a clean towel. He never asked for seconds, never complained. At night, I'd hear him stir in his sleep, sometimes mumbling Selena's name or crying so softly it broke me in two. I started keeping his door cracked and mine open, just in case he needed to know someone was close. But little by little, something shifted. I made him pancakes one morning, burned them, of course, and tried to salvage them with smiley faces drawn in syrup. When I set the plate in front of him, expecting a quiet, thank you like always, he stared down at the weirdly shaped blobs and burst out laughing. You made a monster, he squealed. I blinked. Excuse me. He pointed at the pancake face, one eye bigger than the other, mouth dripping with syrup. That's not a smiley. That's a pancake monster. He laughed so hard he nearly fell off the chair, and I couldn't help it. I laughed too. That was the first time I heard his real laugh. Not polite, not quiet, loud, unapologetic, and wild. I'd never heard anything so good. After that, it became a game. Pancake monsters, toast ghosts, spaghetti snakes. Every meal was a challenge to create the most ridiculous-looking food, and every giggle from Jaden felt like a small piece of his walls falling down. We made a habit of story time at night. He liked to sit on my lap while I read, especially books with animals or silly voices. One night, after a particularly animated reading of the Gruffalo, he looked up and asked, "Were you always this fun?" I blinked. I don't know. Maybe I just needed the right audience. He smiled, leaned his head against my chest, and whispered, "I'm glad you're my dad." I didn't cry, but I wanted to. Not out of sadness, out of gratitude. Because those 5 words felt heavier than any DNA test, any paperwork. They were a promise, and they came from him. Willingly. Freely. Still, there were shadows. Jaden never mentioned Selena. Not once. Not when we passed women in the park. Not when I asked if he wanted to call Grandma Marissa. He shut down whenever the subject came close, his smile disappearing like someone flipped a switch. I didn't push. I just made sure he knew he was safe, that I was staying. I took a few weeks off work, burned through every vacation day I had, just to be home with him. We spent mornings building pillow forts, afternoons drawing dinosaurs on printer paper, and evenings chasing bubbles in the tiny patch of grass outside the building. I watched him go from wary to curious, quiet to playful. One evening, he stood on the couch with a blanket tied around his neck, arms stretched out like wings. "I'm Jaden the Brave," he shouted. "Yes, you are," I said from the kitchen, smiling so hard it hurt. Jaden the Brave, ruler of Couch Kingdom. He laughed, leapt into the cushions, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw no fear in his eyes. No hesitation. Just joy. He still had nightmares. He still jumped at car alarms and flinched when someone raised their voice on TV. But he was healing, and so was I. For the first time in years, my apartment didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like home. It was a quiet Saturday morning. Cartoons playing softly on the TV, Jaden on the floor with his dinosaur figurines, the scent of scrambled eggs still lingering in the air. I was finally starting to feel like we had a rhythm. Nothing perfect, but ours. I'd just poured my first cup of coffee when a knock shattered the calm. Not the soft, neighborly kind. This one was sharp. Intentional. Demanding. I opened the door, and the last person I expected to see was standing there. Selena. Hair pulled into a frizzy bun, her clothes clinging to her like they hadn't been washed in weeks. Her eyes were sunken, skin pale, lips cracked. She looked like a ghost of herself, if the ghost hadn't slept in days and carried a storm in her chest. My grip on the door tightened. "What are you doing here?" Her eyes flicked past me into the apartment. "He's here, isn't he?" I stepped in her line of sight. "What do you want?" She raised her chin, defiant despite the tremble in her stance. "He's mine. I made a mistake, Leo. A terrible one. But I'm his mother, and I want him back." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the nerve of her felt like a punch to the ribs. "You left him in a hot car, Selena. No water. No goodbye. Not even a damn note. You don't get to show up like it was a bad dream you're ready to wake up from." I was desperate, she snapped. I had nowhere to go. No one was helping me. "And your solution was to dump your child and disappear?" I stepped out into the hall, shutting the door behind me so Jaden wouldn't hear. You didn't even check if I was home. You parked 4 blocks away. I thought you'd find him. Her voice broke, and for a moment, the defiance faltered. I panicked. He cried all night. I didn't know what else to do. You didn't call. You didn't even try to reach me. You didn't just panic. You gave up. I crossed my arms. And now that I've done the hard part, now that he's safe and laughing again, you suddenly care? She met my eyes, but there was something hollow in hers. I need him back. I tilted my head. Why? Because you miss him, or because you lost whatever support system you were leeching off of? Silence. Then she muttered, they told me I could lose my benefits if I don't have custody. I didn't know it would come to this. And there it was. The truth she thought I wouldn't see. It wasn't love. It wasn't maternal instinct. It was money. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. Her eyes followed it like a wolf spotting meat. I filed for custody the day I got the DNA results, I said, handing it to her. Emergency order. Court date's already set. She snatched the papers and scanned them, her face draining of color. You can't do this. I already did. Her hands shook. He's my son, Leo, and he's our son. But you gave up your say the day you left him for strangers to find. He was dehydrated, bruised, terrified. And he still hasn't said your name once. Her lip trembled. You think you're a better parent because you showed up for a week? No. I think I'm a better parent because I didn't walk away. The words hung between us like barbed wire. She reached out, trying to touch my arm. I stepped back. Don't, I said. You don't get to rewrite history now. I'll fight you in court. Go ahead. But bring more than excuses and tears. She turned to leave, then paused. Tell him I said hi. I didn't respond. I just watched her go, barefoot in flip-flops, limping slightly, shoulders hunched like the weight of her choices was finally catching up to her. And for the first time since Jaden entered my life, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. Because whatever part of her once loved that boy, it had been buried under years of selfishness and regret. I went back inside. Jaden looked up from the couch. Who was it? I knelt beside him, brushing a curl from his forehead. Nobody important, buddy. He nodded like he already knew. Can we finish our dinosaur story? I smiled. Absolutely. We picked up where we left off, 2 raptors cornered by a T-Rex, with Jaden narrating in a deep, dramatic voice. And as he laughed and roared and waved his arms in excitement, I realized something else. He was choosing joy over memory. He was choosing now over then. Selena could scream about her rights. She could weep in front of a judge. But Jaden had already chosen who felt like home. And it wasn't her. The courthouse smelled like dust and nerves. The kind of place where people's lives got divided by paper and gavel strikes. I sat at the front bench beside Victor, my lawyer, watching as Selena took the stand like a character in a story she hadn't rehearsed enough. She wore a pale blue blouse, ironed but ill-fitting, and too much makeup that couldn't hide the bags under her eyes. Her hands trembled as she reached for the glass of water beside her, trying to maintain the illusion that she had it together. Victor leaned toward me and whispered, "Let her talk. The more she explains, the deeper she'll dig." I nodded, my eyes not leaving her. I didn't feel angry anymore. That had burned out. What I felt now was something colder, resolve. The judge, a woman with steel-gray hair and a voice that cut through noise like a razor, looked over her glasses. "Miss Carter, please tell the court why you left your son unattended in a car registered to your ex-husband, without informing anyone of his whereabouts." Selena's voice wavered. "I was under immense stress. I lost my job, my partner left me, and I didn't have any income. I thought Leo would find Jaden. I parked near his address. I thought it was safer than a shelter." Victor didn't interrupt. He sat calmly, flipping through the file in front of him. The judge continued, her expression unreadable. "Were you aware that your son was found in a vehicle on a 90-degree day, with no food or water, and that the car was locked?" "I didn't mean to hurt him," she said quickly. I didn't know what else to do." That was her defense. A shrug of desperation. When it was our turn, Victor rose like he'd been waiting for this moment all week. He approached the bench with quiet control and opened our folder. "Your Honor, we're not here to punish Miss Carter for being poor or struggling. We are here because of her choices. Choices that endangered a 4-year-old boy's life. This isn't about a single mistake. This is about a pattern of avoidance, neglect, and abandonment." He handed over the documents one by one. "We have the police report. The hospital intake form listing mild dehydration and bruising. Surveillance footage showing no one returned to the vehicle for over 3 hours. We also have medical records indicating this child has not seen a pediatrician regularly since birth. Selena squirmed in her seat. Victor turned toward the gallery, where I sat with Jaden on my lap. And finally, Your Honor, we have the child's own behavior. Jaden has been in Mr. Carter's care since the incident. He sleeps through the night, attends pre-K without issue, and has formed a secure bond with his father. He does not ask for Miss Carter. He shows signs of emotional trauma, yes, but also signs of healing. The judge paused, staring at us both. Then she looked at Selena. Do you have anything else to say before I make my decision? Selena stood, tears forming. He's my baby, she whispered. He's the only good thing I ever had. I know I messed up, but I want another chance. The judge let the silence hang. Then she adjusted her glasses, cleared her throat, and spoke. Miss Carter, your struggle is evident, but it does not excuse the reckless endangerment of a child. Mr. Carter has taken responsibility where you have not. He has provided stability, care, and a safe environment. Therefore, I am granting full legal and physical custody to Mr. Leo Carter. You will have no visitation rights until such time as this court sees sufficient improvement in your circumstances and a clear plan for supervised contact. Selena gasped. No, please, no. But the judge had already turned to the next item on the docket. Selena stood frozen, her mouth moving but no sound coming out. She looked at me, desperate, defeated, and for the first time, I didn't look away. I didn't need to. She whispered, You ruined my life. I stood slowly, Jaden resting his head on my shoulder. You walked away from it, I said quietly. I just picked up what you left behind. She slumped into her chair as I carried Jaden out of the courtroom. The air outside felt fresher than it had in weeks, like a storm had passed and the wreckage was behind us. In the parking lot, Jaden stirred and looked up. Did we win? I smiled and kissed the top of his head. Yeah, buddy. We did. We drove home in silence, but it wasn't the awkward kind anymore. It was the kind of quiet that follows clarity. Jaden fell asleep in his car seat halfway home, his lion plush tucked under his arm. And as I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, I knew something deep in my bones. We weren't surviving anymore. We were beginning. No one prepares you for the quiet moments of fatherhood. The ones that come when the chaos dies down, not the courtroom battles or emergency hospital visits, but the simple mornings when a small voice calls out, Dad, and you realize it's you they're calling for. Not because someone told them to, but because they mean it. The first time Jaden called me Dad, it was a Wednesday evening. He was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing his teeth with a blue toothbrush I'd let him pick out at the store. I was in the hallway, folding towels, listening to him hum the alphabet song between brushes when he said it. Dad, can I have the bubble toothpaste tomorrow? This one's spicy. I froze. It wasn't a big moment. Not dramatic. No music swelled in the background. But it was seismic. That one word, 3 letters, anchored itself into my chest like it had always belonged there. Dad. I stepped into the bathroom, leaned against the door frame, and nodded. Yeah, we'll grab the bubblegum one tomorrow. He grinned, foam on his chin, eyes bright. And just like that, something invisible stitched tighter between us. Becoming a father wasn't a singular event. It wasn't the DNA test. It wasn't the court ruling. It was that slow, unfolding process of being needed, of being chosen over and over again in the small, ordinary ways. Like when Jaden reached for my hand in a crowd, or when he ran to the door when I came home from a quick errand, or when he whispered, Don't leave, during a thunderstorm and I stayed, without needing to be asked twice. But it wasn't easy. There were nightmares. Screaming fits in the middle of the night that left us both shaken. There were days at school where he'd freeze during roll call if someone mentioned the word mom. Mornings when he didn't want to eat, and nights when he clung to me like I might disappear. Trauma doesn't pack its bags and leave because the court said so. It lingers. It seeps. It tests. I got him a therapist. A kind woman named Deja who knew exactly how to sit on the floor with a child and get him to draw his feelings in crayon. Sometimes I'd hear them through the door. That's my dad, he said once, pointing to a stick figure with a crooked smile. He makes pancakes look like animals. Other times, the drawings were darker. Crayon cars with kids alone inside. Big red circles for heat. Tears drawn with such precision, it made my heart ache. We worked through it. Together. I rearranged my life for him. Cut back on hours at work. Set a bedtime routine. Built structure where there had been none. Saturday mornings became our sacred time. Pancakes, cartoons, grocery store adventures. I taught him how to tie his shoelaces. He taught me that no amount of planning could prepare me for glitter glue in the carpet. I watched him blossom. His laughter returned, loud, wild, contagious. He started bringing home drawings from school that weren't just colors scribbled in fury, but pictures of dinosaurs, houses, and two people holding hands. "That's you and me," he said once. "You're tall. I'm fast." He asked about his mom once. Just once. We were sitting on the couch, watching a nature show about baby animals finding their way home. He turned to me, his voice small. "Do you think Mommy misses me?" I didn't flinch. I didn't lie. I just took a deep breath and answered as gently as I could. "I think she's going through something hard. And maybe she does. But right now, she's not ready to take care of anyone. And that's not your fault." He nodded like he understood more than a 5-year-old should have to. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too, kiddo," I whispered, pulling him close. That night, after he fell asleep, I stood in his doorway and watched him breathe. The shadows of dinosaurs danced on his walls from the projector nightlight we picked out together. He was tucked under his favorite blanket, blue with little rockets on it, and he looked peaceful. I remembered a time not long ago when that same boy wouldn't even sleep through the night. When he'd wake up crying, unsure of where he was, who he was with, or if he was safe. Now he called me Dad. He laughed in his sleep. He was healing. And so was I. I thought I had lost everything the day Selena walked out. I thought the silence that followed was the end of my story. But it turns out, the silence was just the beginning of a new one. A better one. Becoming a father wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up. Every day, even when you're exhausted, even when you're scared, even when you're not sure you're enough. Jaden didn't need perfect. He just needed me. And I would never stop being exactly that. 5 years have passed. Jaden's 9 now, taller, sharper, full of questions that tumble out of him before he can even blink. He's got this habit of furrowing his brows when he's thinking, just like I do. He lines up his cereal box perfectly with the edge of the table. He asks why the sun sets, why some birds fly in a V, and why some people leave even when they say they love you. He's not afraid of the answers. He wants the truth. He's always wanted the truth. Last week, he told me he wanted to be a firefighter. We were at the kitchen table, working on a school project about community helpers. I just asked him who he admired most, expecting him to say his favorite teacher or a cartoon hero. Instead, he looked up and said, "I want to save people. The way you saved me." I don't think I said anything for a full minute. My throat closed up so fast I had to excuse myself and pretend I spilled something just to blink back the tears. I stood at the sink and watched the faucet run, pretending it was louder than it was, just so he couldn't hear the sound of my heart breaking open again in the best possible way. He doesn't remember much from that day in the car. Sometimes I catch him trying to. He'll zone out during car rides or fall silent when we pass the street where he was found. But he doesn't ask about Selena anymore. It's as if his soul instinctively filed her away somewhere quiet, where she couldn't hurt him anymore. We moved into a new house 2 years ago. It has a small backyard and a dog named Bucket, Jaden's choice. Bucket is part Labrador, part escape artist, and all heart. Jaden reads to him every night before bed. It started when his teacher gave him a reading assignment, and he decided Bucket made the perfect audience. Now it's a ritual. Some nights I watch from the hallway, listening to his voice trail through the cracks of his door, and I think, this is what peace sounds like. Selena hasn't tried to contact us since the court ruling. I heard she moved out of state, maybe working part-time somewhere, maybe still chasing stability. I don't know. I don't check. I made a promise to myself a long time ago. I would never let my curiosity outrun my responsibility. Jaden's life is built on consistency, trust, and showing up. And that means leaving the past where it belongs. But that doesn't mean I forget. When I tuck Jaden in at night, I still remember the first time I saw him asleep in that hospital bed. Fragile, bruised, alone. I remember every inch of that moment, the beeping machines, the sterile scent, the tiny lion plush in his arms. And I remember the vow I made in silence that night, to never leave. To never let him feel discarded again. I've kept that vow every day since. Fatherhood has taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's a series of small, sacred actions. It's packing lunch with the crust cut off because he says the edges taste like cardboard. It's signing up for parent-teacher conferences even when work is insane. It's kneeling on the floor with him when he's overwhelmed, breathing with him until the storm in his chest quiets. It's learning the difference between giving space and giving up, Jaden's room is a museum of growth. Crayon art from kindergarten lines the wall next to Lego sets and fire truck posters. He wants to paint it red now. Real fireman red, he says. We'll do it this weekend, even if it gets messy. Especially if it gets messy. He's not just growing into a good boy, he's becoming a kind one. Last month, he stood up for a classmate who was being teased about her clothes. Told the other kids, "You don't know what people go through at home." His teacher called me to say how proud I should be. I already was. And sometimes, when he doesn't know I'm watching, I see him do things that make my heart ache in the best way, holding the door for strangers, tying a friend's shoelace, petting Bucket like he's the most precious creature on earth. These aren't things I taught him directly. These are things he absorbed. Because kids don't become who we tell them to be. They become who we are. So I keep trying. I still burn pancakes sometimes. Still get frustrated when the day runs long and the house is a mess. But every night, before I turn off the lights and kiss him on the forehead, I say the same 3 words. I'm right here. And every night, he says it back. 5 years ago, I didn't know I had a son. Now, I can't imagine my life without him. He is not a burden. He is not a mistake. He is not a story I stumbled into. He is the best chapter one never planned. And when he becomes a man, when he finally wears that firefighter's uniform or decides to become something else entirely, I hope he remembers not just the words I said, but the way I stood beside him through every storm. Because sometimes the sirens at your door aren't warnings of disaster. Sometimes they're the sound of fate finally finding you.